up, everybody, and welcome into the Fantasy Effect. Hope you had a great Christmas or holiday season. Happy New Year. We are back. We took a little bit of a break over the holidays, but we're back and ready to dive into some more stuff here. We just finished up the fantasy playoffs, and so we're gonna dive into the off season here. The Holler, man, how's it going? I think I don't know about you. I'm excited to kind of have an excuse to turn off the Rose Bowl right now.
Yeah, dude,
it's a death show.
It's pretty bad. I've been hanging with a lot of family, so I've been kind of on and off with games and stuff. But I watched a little bit earlier. That game was super fun. Texas ASU was super good. There's a lot of controversy. I don't know about controversy is the right word, but Scatterbo, to me, he's a football player, man. He's good.
Oh, he's good.
Yeah. But yeah, no, Happy New Year, everybody. I'm stoked it's been a few weeks off for me as well, and I'm stoked to be back. And believe it or not, like this, the next couple months is one of my favorite times in fantasy, just because it's the time to really grind, and it makes, in my opinion, it makes it the most fun. What dynasty is the most fun. It's just like figuring out how to fix your teams, how to make yourself better manager, and then diving into like rookies. That's my thing. I love Debbie's. I love Debbie leagues, and I just love diving into the new rookies.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I think me, I like diving into my sheets with my analytics and scouting out the different rookie profiles. And then draft season is one of my favorite times of the year, talking about rookie prospects. And the best part too is during spreadsheet season, you can't be wrong. No one's scoring points, and so no one's getting hurt during the off season, so it's like nothing can hurt you, and you're always right. And then the pain of the regular season rolls around, and everyone can know how wrong you are about stuff. But
and then your fantasy, your fantasy teams are like all done. So week 18 is always fun to watch, and then the playoffs are obviously the playoffs are great. So it's a good time in football for everything. So and like I said before, like this is a good time to reflect where to get better. And hopefully like today we'll talk a few things like how to dive into your teams and see where you can improve.
Definitely. Yeah. So let's jump right into it. We don't have a ton of news. I think the biggest piece is from the Jets. What a dysfunctional season this has been, but it seems like the Jets are ready to move on from Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams. That's the last piece of news, is that I think the Rodgers and the owner there are kind of at odds, and it seems like Devontae Adams is going to go wherever Rodgers goes at this point. And I don't know where that is. Maybe would you be surprised if Aaron Rodgers doesn't play another snap in the NFL? Because I wouldn't be surprised at all if he calls it quits.
To me, he shouldn't. I saw a stat that like his numbers were like just as good as Patrick Mahomes this year. But what if we've talked about it on the pod before, is like Patrick Mahomes, like I don't really care about his stats. Like he's the best gamer, right? He knows how to win the games. To me, Aaron Rodgers just knows how to whine these days. So it's like I don't care if their stats are the same, like they're completely different players. So I think can't remember where I saw it, but I'm sure it was a Jets fan or something.
His stats actually really weren't that bad if you just look at the whole numbers. Like 3,600 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 10 interceptions. Like just on the whole, it's not awful, but the Jets were just so bad. Like the team was bad. Nothing. The body language coming from him was always just off. Doesn't seem like the receivers, minus Devontae Adams, liked him either. There's a report too that Garrett Wilson was like, "Hey, if you guys bring back Rodgers, I'm out." And so that's not always great when one of your star players is that divisive.
To me, Breece Hall just was not the same, and to me, I don't think it's Breece Hall. I think it's maybe the whole offensive scheme and whatever. But to me, their offensive scheme kind of runs through Aaron Rodgers. Like whatever he wants to do, they do. So it just hurts. If he comes back, it hurts everybody. They're going to probably lose Garrett Wilson. Then they're probably going to, Breece Hall won't be the same. So for me, that's something to look at, right? Moving forward is kind of wait and see what happens with Aaron Rodgers. But to me, Breece Hall is a sell if Aaron Rodgers goes back, right? It would be tough because people probably don't want to buy him. But if I could get, something solid for him, I might be taking a little bit of a discount, or the other way around. I'd probably be losing on my profit a little bit. But I think I'd move off of him because he just was not the same with Aaron Rodgers.
I moved Brees Hall. So I just recently redid my dynasty rankings kind of from scratch. I just took a look at who's under contract for next year and just kind of built it back from the ground up. I do kind of every offseason. Brees Hall, I put him down at running back 7, where I think he's been consistently kind of in the top 3 for me, but I think just the situation in the Jets is just so bad. And if you kind of look at, 2 years ago where you could say, well, the quarterback play wasn't great. It wasn't, but Zach Wilson was a check down king. And so Brees Hall got a ton of check down work where he didn't necessarily get that much. He also didn't get as much volume this year, too. I think they gave Braylon Allen some goal line work, too, which kind of hurt him. Brees Hall's like, man, I don't know what to do with him. If I'm in a startup, though, I don't want to touch him. That's kind of where I'm at, too, because I have him right now kind of at the back of the 3rd round for startups. And even then, like, I think I'd rather like wait around or wait a little bit and take maybe like an Achane or Kenneth Walker or maybe like a Bucky Irving if I'm waiting like a little bit longer rather than take Brees Hall. There's just no upside, right? Like,
and we know he's a really good running back, but there's so many question marks with the Jets, right? And I think that's a really big piece into looking into like, okay, the season's over. Let's look into some of these players that moving forward, like what are, I worry about Brees Hall, right? Unless they bring in, obviously they're probably bringing in a new head coach, a new offensive coordinator. In a few months down the line, this whole thing could change on Brees Hall, right? They get rid of Aaron Rodgers, they bring everything in, so then that can change. But I don't really think he's going to move up higher than that running back 7 or 6, which you're talking about, which I agree. And then if he's, running backs in the 3rd round, that's tough, right? Unless you're going, wide receiver, quarterback, at that rate, even like I still think there's wide receivers that you could take that are more reliable than Brees Hall with the up and down.
Definitely.
And then we'll talk about it later, but this running back class is loaded, right? And so, man, it's awesome. So there's probably too many to go around, to be honest, but it's loaded. So, it's always nice for the new fresh face with running backs for sure, in my opinion.
There's a lot of running backs that are good in this class. I mean, I know we saw Ashton Genty didn't have a great game last night, but he's still good. We saw Cam Scatteraboo this morning, who's just running just all over Texas. I know Nick Singleton had a nice game last night too. So there's a bunch of guys. Trevion Henderson busted off a huge run against Oregon. Granted, the entire Ohio State offense is at the moment, but it is what it is.
Dude, Oregon looks terrible. There, though. And then even Katron Allen, if he comes out, is really, really good. So, there's just so many guys. So, I think that for right now, there's too many guys to go around, right? Because there's still the running backs, like Saquon's still amazing, right? So there's just might be too many running backs. So that's another reason why like a Brees Hall is going to be dropped down a little bit, because you don't know if he's going to be that same workhorse.
No, for sure. And honestly, Ashton Genty, I put him as my running back 3 in Dynasty right now, which might seem a little crazy, but he's good. Last night, excluded, but
I was just watching some of his runs and stuff. Like, I know just overall, like if you look at the whole picture, he didn't look the same, but that's the best team they played all year. Outside of I could probably argue that Penn State's playing better than Oregon right now. So that's the best team they played all year. So to me as a running back, he's dynamic. He's really, really good. So I have no arguments there putting him up there at running back 3.
I'll be interested to see what his PFF grade comes in for that game, because I think he played better than his box score looked. I know he did fumble twice, but as soon as he touched the ball, he was getting just swarmed, and so I'm
easy.
curious to see what his yards before contact was too, because it could have been high, probably negative.
Yeah, so him and a couple other guys that come to mind are like, just when they're the best player on the team, it's to me it's easy for a good team to just try to shut them out, and for him to get 100 yards with Penn State knowing, okay, we just have to shut down Genty. That just speaks volumes to how good he is.
No, for sure. Couldn't agree more. All right, let's get in. Who was your fantasy MVP of the 2024 season?
Yeah. Jaden Daniels, so I wish I had a few more shares. I have a solid amount. He helped me win a few, I think 2 or 3 championships that I had him with. The other guy that came to mind was Bo Nix. Both of those quarterbacks just blew all the other rookies out of the water this year, right? So I can't really say that I would have taken Bo Nix ever 101 or early, even probably the first 3 picks. But I wouldn't have faulted anybody. It probably would have been hard to do. There was a little bit of talk, but I think Jaden Daniels should have gone 101. And to me, it's because of his running upside. I know Caleb Williams has a little bit of running upside, but it's not the same as Jaden Daniels.
It's not the same.
Yeah. So I think we really need to think about that, right? Jalen Hurts comes to mind a little bit, but I think Jaden Daniels is a little bit more like a Lamar Jackson than he is at Jalen Hurts. Yeah. Right. And so like he's more of like a cheat code than anything, Lamar Jackson. So Jaden Daniels was outstanding. And I think the whole Commanders team kind of surprised everybody. So I think that's just a solid football team. They play really well. They finish games well. And so I think the biggest thing is Jaden Daniels was by far my fantasy MVP.
Oh, I love it. And one thought I had while you were talking there, so that's 2 years in a row now where a rookie quarterback who we kind of wrote off a little bit based on the situation ended up being one of the best rookie quarterbacks. So CJ Stroud the year before going to Houston, and then now Jaden Daniels in Washington. I know we talked about how he's smaller, the O line's bad.
Yeah,
all that was true, but he was still just fantastic. So I think that's a lesson learned for me, and hopefully I'll follow through with it. But it's like, if you like a prospect coming in, don't let the landing spot deter you from it. Like trust your evaluation on these players, trust your talent. I mean, he was the 102 for a reason in the NFL draft. So just trust your evaluations there.
Yeah.
Don't cave into the hive mind.
Part of me does believe that like the Bears are cursed, just because like Caleb Williams he's a good quarterback, right? And so he landed there, and I just imagine maybe where he would land. Say he landed with the Commanders, how good he could have been, right? And so, but Jaden Daniels, I mean, I wish there's some spots that I took Caleb that I wish I would have taken Jaden.
Oh, for sure. I wish I had a lot more Jaden Daniels. I still have a decent amount, but I wish I would have had more.
Yep.
One guy he's my fantasy MVP that I have very few of is Brian Thomas Jr. I was very wrong. I think I talked about how he was a slant boy, and that's all he did, that and go deep. And to be fair, that's a little true, but he's really good at what he does. And in the fantasy playoffs, when it counted most, his wide receiver finishes were 4, 3, and 12. That's hard to beat, and chances are where you took him, probably like the 108, your team was probably kind of right there on the verge.
Already good,
and he probably put you over the top. I know. I faced a lot of Brian Thomas's during the fantasy playoffs, and I was really hoping I had more on my side, which hurt me a little bit that I didn't. But man, he's fantastic, and he was doing this with Mac Jones down the stretch. So there's a lot of rumors that they could get a different coaching staff coming in. I think I've seen Ben Johnson from the Lions coming over there, which I think would do wonders for that offense. I think the sky's the limit for Brian Thomas Jr. I'm curious, how high do you have Brian Thomas Jr. right now? Because I just moved him up to wide receiver 10, and that felt kind of high, but also like I could probably move him up.
So I need to work on my rankings. I plan on doing that this weekend. But he already, for me, is up at he's at, well, I need to update, but he's at wide receiver 16. But yeah, he's up at top 10 for me, maybe probably 10. There's a couple guys that I probably couldn't put ahead of him, like Apuka, Nico. I couldn't put him ahead. So, but I probably can put him, right at 9, 10. With AJ Brown. I saw, right. So I think that's where I would put him, and I feel comfortable with it. And I'm with you there. I'm right with you. I was kind of out on him. I was like, I don't really know. He didn't look like he was kind of checked out a bit sometimes when he was running routes and at LSU. But I think that's probably a Brian Kelly thing more than anything. So I just, we miss on players all the time, and, I wish I had more of him, and I do have a few shares. And so, I have one where where he was really helpful, and I won the league, so, sometimes we miss on players, and, but, I know a lot of people were out on Bo Nix, and you and I were in on Bo Nix, so there's misses and there hits. So, but yeah, I think he's definitely a top 10 wide receiver, and like he could be taken in the end of the second round in the startup, and I wouldn't fault anybody, right? If you're going wide receiver, I if you're, sometimes people, wait on the quarterbacks or whatever, and I would feel so good if I had him as my wide receiver too, and even as my wide receiver one, take him in the third round or whatever. I think that's exactly where he's going to go, back of the second, early third in the startup.
That's exactly. Actually, I have him at 22 overall, so that's right at the back of the second. And that, like you mentioned, so people miss on guys all the time. Like no one's going to be right 100% of the time. I think the key there is like when you're wrong, just admitting that you're wrong and not getting stubborn. Just be like, no, I know this guy sucks. He's just getting lucky.
Yeah.
That's just burying your head in the sand. Just adapting to what you're seeing.
Yep.
Brian Thomas is a guy that I was really out on, and I wish I wasn't at this point. But
I mean, we'll if you can do it with Mac Jones, you can do it with I don't know. About,
you can do it with anyone.
Yeah, I was gonna say anybody, but
Drew Lock.
Yeah, you probably can do it with anybody, right? So, I got to be honest. The rookie wide receivers were outstanding this year. I know Marvin Harrison Jr. was a little bit disappointing. I think that's a lot to say about Kyler, more than Marvin Harrison Jr. But there is spots for him to get better. And then Malik Neighbors was just outstanding. A lot of injuries for him, but he was outstanding. And then Ladd McConkey, the list goes on. We got really spoiled with this, I feel like, with this rookie draft, rookie class. And, I think it's not going to be anywhere near the same in 25, in my opinion.
I was just going to say, I don't think we're going to be anywhere near. There might be a couple of guys towards the top that are good on the same level, but it's not going to be as deep, I don't think. I think because I was moving through and just some of these wide receivers, I think I put Tech kind of at wide receiver like 16, 17, 18, somewhere in that range. And he's my top guy. And so whereas like Marvin Harrison and Malik Neighbors last year, they were top 10 from the get-go. Yep. So this class isn't nearly as good, but not to say that they won't be successful. It's just I would caution people that expect the same kind of levels of
indeed output. Yep, 100%.
All right, so let's dive into some of these questions that we're all gonna be faced with this offseason. This is kind of where you can start to gain advantages in your league. So let's kind of go through them. Let's talk about Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy. Minnesota they went from this situation where they had no quarterback to now they have two really good ones, or at least a rookie who they think is good. They took in the top 10, or I think 11th, and then Sam Darnold, who's been arguably, he's not really getting talked about as an MVP, but like. He's pretty good. Like if you compare his numbers to kind of how Allen and Lamar have done, like the rushing isn't there, but like passing numbers, he's fantastic. Where do you think Sam Darnold goes this offseason? Do you think they stick with him in Minnesota and try to shop JJ McCarthy, or what are you thinking?
I'm gonna be honest. I have no clue right now, right? Because it's possible that they keep him, but they also have JJ McCarthy, right? So. They will have to re-sign Sam Darnold, right? So my thinking is if they don't, I'm going to probably stick to what I've said earlier, is if they don't win the Super Bowl, I think they move on from Sam Darnold, because then they can, pay other guys to make their team even better, right? I still think JJ McCarthy is a good quarterback. I think he can get them kind of in the same spot Sam Darnold is, right? So I think they could pay other areas of their team to make their team, just as good again. And I still think, but say Sam Darnold, say the Vikings win the Super Bowl. Sorry, Ron, but we'll say they won the Super Bowl, and I think they pay Sam Darnold. He looks outstanding there, right? Their head coaches are going to go anywhere, so I think he's going to be really, really good with everything, all the circumstances with the Vikings. If he were to move somewhere else, I would caution. I would try to move him. Because I think right now his value is at an all-time high. I've seen him going like projected like 107, 108 rookie drafts for a first. And so to me, I guess it's just off the top of my head, like that seems crazy. But how this class is, if you need a quarterback and he's doing really well, like last week he put up really, really good numbers. If you were in the finest, if if you were in the fantasy final, like the championships, you had him, you'd feel really good about it. So, but I just caution if he goes somewhere else, kind of there's the thoughts where he could go, like the Raiders or the Jets, or just names I'm throwing out there, just doesn't look good. So I would caution Sam Darnold then, and so I think, but in terms of money, I think if they don't win the Super Bowl, they won't pay him.
I agree, and I think if he was a Super Bowl with the Vikings, I think they have no choice.
Yeah.
But to pay him, right? You can't just cut a guy after let him walk after your franchise Super Bowl who's never won one before.
Yeah.
But the thing is, too, and you touched on it. Like, so I was going through some of the free agents, and kind of some of these teams that have guys under contract. So these are the teams that don't really have quarterbacks under contract, or they have bad ones. It's the Raiders, the Giants, the Browns, the Titans, the Steelers. Incidentally, don't have any of their quarterbacks under contract. They have none for next year. I think they're going to re-sign Russell Wilson, and then the Vikings, right? And so I think my evaluation of Sam Darnold and JJ McCarthy is basically the same. I want whichever one is playing for Kevin O'Connell and the Vikings. If one of them goes somewhere else, I'm going to be a lot less excited about either one of them, to be honest.
And
if you go from throwing to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison and TJ Hawkinson to, let's just say he goes to the Titans, I think it's a hot name right now. It's like, okay, there's Calvin Ridley, who's fine. Who else is there, right? And their offensive line, the Vikings' offensive line is the top, 7-8 unit. The Titans are bottom 5 by far. So then you're just going to get the Jets version of Sam Darnold instead of this Vikings version that we've seen so far.
Yep. And so we put those names out, or those teams out there, Raiders, Giants. Those two teams are probably going to draft a quarterback. They both are high up there. Titans, Steelers, like I think Titans is the one name that kind of makes sense, right? They're kind of more farther back in the draft. Not too far, but a little farther back in the draft. So they're not going to get one of those top 2 quarterbacks. To me, there's only 2 that are worthwhile going to be a starter right away. But then we talk about the Steelers and then him coming back to the Vikings. I agree. I think the Steelers are going to, sign Russell Wilson. He's gotten them as far as they've gotten so far, but put him on the Raiders the Giants might be okay because they have Malik Neighbors, but I don't think that's going to happen. But put him on the Raiders. I know they have Brock Bowers, but again, they need more pieces. And I think he is, succeeding because of Justin Jefferson, because of Jordan Addison, because of TJ Hawkinson, and even because of Aaron Jones. So I just think he's in a really, really good spot. If he were to move, I don't think it's the same.
I agree. So knowing that, what would you say? You probably aren't going to try to go out and acquire Sam Darnold right now, but let's say you have him. Are you trying to move him just trying to offset and get some value out of him in case he does go to one of these bad spots, and then because then his value might just tank, right? So you're trying to kind of sell now and try to cop out of to get here's my value, right? Instead of just like, well, I'm going to go down with the ship, or potentially hold on to a lottery ticket of him staying in Minnesota.
Yeah. So for me, I would obviously. I say I have him as my QB3 or whatever, and I've been I have a rookie quarterback that hasn't done that well or whatever, right? I would look to move him now versus later because like I said earlier, his value is at an all-time high right now. So I would look to move him now because I worry if he goes somewhere else, it's not going to be the same. And I'd rather lose out than be left holding the bag and him being the Jets Sam Darnold. So for me, now is the time to move or just hold, right? Just hold him and reap the benefit if there is a benefit.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you can get like a late first for Darnold now, I think I'm doing it, right? I think I'm just like, okay, thanks for your service, sir.
Exactly.
Goodbye.
Yep, I would do it too. I would maybe hope, and I think you probably could get it. I think I saw it was maybe just a question in our Discord. It was like a 108 and a 208. To me, that's a smash. I know other people were like, we're like, oh, that's a equal. To me, I think it's still the Sam Darnold in my mind is like, ooh, that's not a sexy name. So it's just like, ooh, that sounds like a lot. But if you look at everything, his numbers and how well he's done in this season, I think that's a solid return. And also, if you're looking to buy, that's a solid that's probably what you're gonna have to pay for him, right? But if I were to get like a 111, I would like to have a little, maybe a
extra
second or
coming
a
back.
third, yeah, something a little extra. But I'm probably not going to argue and haggle for that extra, because I 100% worry if he moves from the Vikings, right? So if I'm gonna get something for him and I'm looking to sell, I'll take it.
Hmm. And if he does come back to Minnesota, I think he's a great, and I think the Denver Kevin from the Denver Royale just mentioned it, he's a
Yep,
solid QB2. He's a fantastic. He's your ideal QB2, right? It's like
100%.
he's not going to screw you over in any given week, right? And he has the spike weeks
Yeah.
he's capable of where he
And
goes
this
off.
is a perfect trade for, in the fantasy playoffs. You're moving Dak Prescott for Darnold and Jonnu Smith, right? So,
Love it.
Kevin from the Debbie Morale is thinking he's staying with the Vikings. Boom. If he stays with the Vikings, now you're in a really good spot. You have a solid QB2. If he leaves, you're hoping that he lands with a team that is also going to help him get better. So I think that's still a possibility. I do know, like, say he does land with the Titans. I know Brian Callahan is a really good offensive mind. So I think
Hmm. They
it's a
need a lot of help though.
possibility he could be okay. But I still, worry a little bit if that happens. But I'm really kind of not sure where it's going to go with Sam Darnold and the Vikings. So I
Hmm.
have no fault of anybody going out and buying or just holding.
Definitely. All right, let's move on to the Falcons quarterback situation. It seems like they've pretty much turned the corner. Michael Penix is going to be the guy. Kirk Cousins, I would imagine he's going to start somewhere next year. Is
Yep.
he done, man? He didn't look good like at all. He looked pretty awful, especially the last like month or two of the season.
Yeah.
Do you have any faith in Kirk Cousins for your fantasy rosters?
So no, well, not 100% no, but I need to see a little bit more. I don't know if he's still like
Hmm.
not a fully healthy. That's a possibility. But the dude threw so
Sure.
many interceptions. It just did
It
not
just
look
looked
good.
bad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they have really good weapons. I mean, I thought it was pretty funny on Sunday night, the game that like I think the first drive, it was Michael Penix threw an interception. It's like, okay, he's doing the same thing as
Hmm.
Kirk Cousins. But I do think there's more upside with Michael Penix. I'm not a huge believer in Michael Penix, but I think he'll be a serviceable, back end QB2. So I do
Sure.
believe they'll move on from Kirk Cousins. And then if we go back to the teams again, just like Sam Darnold, like, where's he going to go? And for me, he may end up being more like a backup quarterback than anything. And so then you're not going to
Sure.
even, obviously not going to get anything out of him. So, but for him, like, say he were to land on like the Titans versus Sam Darnold, like, I think there's still a little more upside for Kirk Cousins than there would be for Sam Darnold. Um,
Sure.
but he looks so bad this year, so I don't know if it's totally injury or if it's just he's kind of on that falling off that cliff a little bit. There's only one Tom Brady. There's only Aaron Rodgers was solid as he's getting older,
Hmm.
but as guys get older, they're not the same.
Oh, for sure. He was bad. Like
Yeah,
he really didn't have, other than I think those two games against Tampa Bay. And I think he lit up Dallas too. But other than that, like he was awful. I
yeah,
mean, 11 of his 18 touchdowns came in those three games, two against
yep,
Tampa and one against Dallas. So you could, looking down at his stat line, I see a lot of zeros in the touchdown column, and
so
not a
many.
ton of yardage either. Right, a lot of 200 numbers in there.
Yeah.
So that's scary. And then Michael Penix, like, has he done enough to for you to feel any kind of confident? I don't have any Michael Penix shares. I didn't draft a single one last year, so I'm curious. I don't know how many shares you have or where you were at
One.
with him, but you have one. Okay,
Yeah.
so I'm
My team
guessing you're.
sucked, and I think I had some extra seconds or whatever, and I just got one, and so I was with you, right? I was totally out on him. I felt like Washington, they had a really good offense.
Mhm,
They kind of put him in the soup, like a really really good spot. They had three really really good wide receivers, etc.
mhm,
So he's looked okay, but for me, I don't think he's going to be a very good like fantasy quarterback, right? And so we play this
mhm.
game for we need the points, and I think he'll be a solid, back end QB2, maybe with some okay games, but I just don't feel good about it, right? He's somebody I would pick maybe in like the later rounds as like my quarterback 3, right? As just I'll throw him in on a bye, and
Sure.
so and that's kind of how like I build my teams a lot of times is like I want two solid quarterbacks, and so for me, you're not going to get enough out of Michael Penix, and unless he can really, run the ball a bit more, and that offense gets a little better. But for me, I think they just want him to not throw turnover or not have any turnovers, and just hand the ball off to Bijan, and they'll be good. Like, I think their team is pretty solid.
Mm-hmm.
They'll probably get better with that coaching, that coaching staff and everything. And so for me, I think he's more going to be just serviceable than anything.
No, I agree. And I mean, I was just looking at his fantasy finishes. He was 31st and 23rd his 2 weeks he started, which it kind of goes with kind of what I saw watching him. He looks fine, but not something that I necessarily want in my fantasy lineups.
Exactly.
Let's touch on some of these running backs. So there's a couple guys here that I think might have value, but also might get squashed depending on how the NFL draft shakes out in the free agency, right? So like Chase Brown, DeAndre Swift, Jerome Ford, Isaiah Pacheco, Tyrone Tracy. Those guys, where do you think? What are your thoughts here? Do you think? I think Chase Brown for me. I think he's the one that's probably the safest. I think Swift probably is too, based on their needs. But Jerome Ford, Pacheco, and Tyrone Tracy are the ones that are a little bit scary, right?
Yeah. So if I were to rank it, I think actually I would have Tyrone Tracy over Swift, because I know Swift was solid, and unfortunately I bought Swift a couple times, or maybe only two of them, and I sent a late first for him. Ended up losing in the championship in that one or whatever. But for me, he just didn't look good in the last, the last stretch of games for fantasy terms, right? And so I know they have a lot of other needs. So I think I would go like Chase Brown as my number one, and then kind of 2A and B would be Swift and Tyrone Tracy. And I think the reason I like Tyrone Tracy is because he does a good job. I know he has a little bit of fumble issues, but I think they need so many other needs that I think they're going to get their quarterback. Then they're going to they should start build their, their line and their defense and all that. And I don't know how many years they signed Singletary, but they could use both of them again.
He's there for another year. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think they use both those guys, and I think you might get one more year out of Tracy, and then you're going to move on. Right. But I think Jerome Ford and Pacheco, the way that the Chiefs are, they're just going to bring in whoever they want or need. And, they just will use them. And it's crazy to me, like, he must not be fully healthy, because they really haven't used them much since he's been back, right? They've used Kareem Hunt a lot more. So if a guy like Kareem Hunt's beating you out, that's not looking good for me. And so to me, that's the one I worry about the most. And then Jerome Ford, he's been okay, but I just think they're going to need to either get I don't know. The Browns need so much. So maybe all those guys will be back, right? But I worry the most probably about Ford and Pacheco.
I think so too. I think Ford is for sure the one that's out, but I think that's baked into his price. I think you could probably much get him for any third at this point.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't hate that, right? And if for some reason they decide that they needed to get a bunch of other people, whether it was for their line, whether it's extra receivers, whatever. Hell, then you have a starting running back that you paid a 23rd.
He's a guy that I like to have on my team. Like, of course, this year we had so many injuries, right? So he's a guy that later down in the season, if you are in the playoffs, you were able to put him in your lineup, and he got you some points, right? And so I think Chase Brown, I think he'll be back, and should be the lead running back. He looked really, really good. He does kind of like all what they want him to do, right? He catches the ball really well, and they move the offense really well. Like, Joe Burrow's an awesome quarterback, and so it's gonna be all around him, right? They're gonna throw the ball 40 to 50 times a game, and so he's not going to get that many carries. So I think overall, like, I say they bring him back, and so for me, he's the safest one there. And then Swift, like I said earlier, I just think he'll probably be back because they have so many other needs. But yeah, I totally agree on Ford and Pacheco.
Yeah. Another running back here that's not. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, the one with like Pacheco, like, I think that's kind of the difference between Ford and Pacheco is, like, I don't think Pacheco you can use him in your lineup next year at all. Like, you don't know what you're going to get from him. Ford could end up being the lead running back some games, and then you can put him in or not. But Pacheco, you put him in, and he's going to give you 3 to 5 points, and then you're kind of screwed.
Ford's a little bit better of a pass catcher too than Pacheco is, but you just never know with Andy Reid and the Chiefs. They do some weird things. Another running back here I wanted to touch on was Bucky Irving, right? He kind of he was a guy that I was super high on, and then the NFL didn't really draft him for whatever reason because he tested like poo poo. But then turns out when the games and the pads come on, he's good. Go figure. So I think he kind of outplayed Rachaad White towards the end there when I think he 100% did. Do we think he's going to continue getting that lead back opportunities next year? And are you comfortable? I think he's going at about like a weight first. Let's call it like 107, 108, 109, somewhere in that range. Are you comfortable paying that to acquire him, or are you of the mind that's like, well, he's still a little bit risky because there's so many guys there? Because even Sean Tucker got some run and looked good at times for Tampa Bay this year.
So I'm like on the fence. I would need to I'm not buying now with the first because depending on like the landing spots of the running backs coming in, I think there could be a couple running backs coming in that are better than Bucky. I know he played really, really well. Like he did great, right? And so I think he's 100% think he's worth the first, but I just would caution like buying for that right now because I think some of those running backs coming in could be better than Bucky. And so and how they use like all three of those running backs, I think I caution a little bit.
Sure.
But yeah, I mean, if I was like, I'm not worried. I'm worried about all the running backs coming in, and I don't really know what's going to happen with the rookie running backs or whatever. And you have the 111, 112, no problem. Like moving that straight up for Bucky. And I actually right now I don't know if that gets done, right? So I think he's going to be in that 18 to 24 range running backs next year, right? I think ranked. Where do you have him right now?
I have him as running back 11 right now.
That's fair.
And I actually have him over all the rookies except for Genty. Obviously, we have higher, but
I think it depends on where some of them land, and then that might shuffle a little bit. I think so right now, if it was me, I'm holding and waiting to see where those land. If we get bad landing spots and somebody's like, hey, I'll send my or I try to go out and try to send my 108, 109, whatever for him, I would feel comfortable with that. And I may be crazy thinking that he's like 18 to 24. Like I said before, I really need to dive in and update mine. And there's guys off the top of my head right now that I would bump him above, like the guy I love, Brian Robinson Jr. To me, he's above Brian Robinson Jr. And I think I have him at like 13 or 14, right? And so I need to adjust. So I don't know exactly where I would put him, but I don't find him at 11 crazy at all.
So it's one of those things too, where when you start putting the list of running backs together, it's like, well, you get past the top like 6, 7, 8 guys, and you're like, well, hell, I got to put someone here, and that's kind of where Bucky Irving ends up, right? And that's kind of also where like Chase Brown and like Chuba Hubbard and like Kenneth Walker, some of those guys end up in that range, and you're just like, I don't love doing this, but it's like someone's got to be there, and that's where I think if you're going into a dynasty startup. Right now, I want to try to get at least one of, Jahmyr Gibbs, Bijan, the opportunity to take Ashton Genty, Jonathan Taylor, Saquon, Kyron Williams, one of those guys, if not two of them, because then it's like, I think, well, probably not two, but I think one, because then after that, it's like, well, let me just wait. Let me just take some of these old guys at the back and just try again later, because some of these guys that they're going to get boosted, like Chuba Hubbard, love Chuba Hubbard. He did fantastic. He's kind of in that running back like 13 to like 15 range right now, but it's like I don't feel good spending a fourth, fifth round startup pick on him when some of the receivers in that area are like a DK Metcalf, like I say, Flowers, or Michael Pittman, whoever. I'd much rather spend it on that or maybe like a tight end like a George Kittle or something. Those running backs like in that zone, I feel like that's where. When I look back on my teams the following year, I'm like, well, that's where I went wrong. I can see it right there. I took a running back who is ranked higher because kind of out of, though there's no one else, more than like their talent deserves to be ranked this high.
Yep, agree 100%. So I was just looking at my rankings. It's all over the place. But yeah, he would be in that 10 through 14 range with James Cook, Josh Jacobs, and then it would be Chase Brown and Bucky.
Okay. Yeah, and when you said running back 18-24, I was like, oh god, I might be crazy. I put
Yeah,
him all the way
no,
up at 11. I was like, oh shit.
and then I go back and look at the running backs. It's like, okay, I have Brian Robinson up there at 14. I got David Montgomery at 15. It's like, okay, I mean, I need to move those guys down. So, like what really sucks is like Brian Robinson Jr. was like so good. And then the last couple of weeks, I think that's more what he is actually the last couple of weeks.
I think so.
And so I was always riding high on, I liked him a lot and he played really well. But he's got a little bit of fumble issues. And then I think, the other guys are solid too. So, it's just, he's not that number one guy that some days I thought he might have been.
He's not, but he's a great running back too,
Yeah.
and a guy that generally goes lower than he should because he's not like the sexy name, and people you just go, oh, it's Brian Robinson, whatever. But that's 2 years in a row now where he's been really serviceable, if not awesome for your lineup. So those are the names to kind of keep in the back of your mind. It's like, hey, this is a guy that's probably going to outperform their startup ADP. And
so now that I look at where I'm at, I would definitely buy Bucky for a first, and so like if you look at a couple, I was in the Debbie Royale. They put together a ton of mock drafts over the last few weeks, and I was in quite a few of them. And so if you look at that first round, 1 through 12, there were and most of the time there were 4 running backs taken: Genty, Hampton, and Judkins, and Caleb Johnson. So for me, Caleb Johnson is like all over the place for everybody. Some people love him, some people hate him. I think for me, it really depends on where he lands and how he tests and all that. But I would much rather have Bucky Irving than Caleb Johnson. He was taken in this one I'm looking at 111. Judkins 109, Hampton and Genty. I think that I would have Bucky over Amari and Hampton. So therefore, I would easily, because he was on this one I'm looking at, he was taken at 104. So I would easily move a first for Bucky.
Yeah, I would. The Caleb Johnson thing, we'll get into it when we get into our
later,
breakdowns. But like, that's someone's gonna need to tell me why I'm wrong on Caleb Johnson. No. I don't see it. Like, he's got good vision, he's good patience, but like he has no top end speed. Yeah, he's a plotter if I've ever seen one, and he's good. Like he's fine. He did great at Iowa, but it's like he gets out in the open field, and it's like these 15-yard runs. It's like some of these other running backs, like Hampton or Genty, like dude, them dudes are gone. Whereas Caleb Johnson's getting run down. So
yeah. And so, like, I was looking at like a lot of them, and if he's the 4th one taken, like, with these
yeah, give me Bucky all
these
day.
Players this year, it's just like I don't feel good after Tet and Genty. I don't feel very good after it. And then the one other guy I really, really like, there's 2 other guys I really like, both the tight ends, Warren and Loveland. But I'm not going to take. I'd much rather have Bucky than Warren or Loveland, right? And so I don't feel bad about moving a first for Bucky if those are the guys I'm going to end up with.
And we can talk about Tyler Warren, but I think there's a chance that he moves up in the Brock Bowers category of like, you can take him as early as like 104, 105, somewhere in that range. That dude can ball, man. He's legit.
You must have saw my question later on our notes, because that was my question. Is like,
that's funny.
Can we take him as high as 105? And I think we can.
I think you can at least as of now, because really once you get past Genty and Tet, there's a lot of guys where it's like, I like these guys, but I don't necessarily I'm not sold on them being, the 103, 104.
The reason I picked 5 is because Genty, Tet, and then the 2 quarterbacks probably are going to go because of how high they go, and then they're going to start right away. But I may take him over Cam Ward. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not a big Cam Ward guy. I don't know about Shedeur Sanders. Like, so, I need to do a little more diving in on both those guys and take some more time watching a little more film and seeing, more of their traits. But I would not argue anybody if he gets a top 20 in a solid spot where he's going to be that number 1 tight end and he can be used all over the place, right? He's a gamer.
That's the thing, and I think it comes down to, it's like if you look at the 2 quarterbacks and then Tyler Warren, The quarterbacks, they might be good. I don't know. Quarterbacks don't always pan out. The tight ends, more often than not, the ones taking that high do. Kyle Pitts excluded. I don't need to get into that, but Tyler Warren is like my degree of confidence in him being a good pro is so much higher than the quarterbacks, and I think the only reason it's a discussion is because the quarterback, positional value, right, in Superflex dynasty leagues.
Yep.
But it's like, is that a good enough reason to take a guy over someone who you is going to be good?
Yeah, I'm with you. And there's only so many of those guys in this draft that are like, are going to be good, right? We had a lot last year and we were spoiled, but this year it's like, could he be good? I don't know. It's there's Luther Burden. Like, could he be
there's
good?
Like
yeah,
four that I feel like really, really good about.
Yeah.
And then after that, it gets a little dicey.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about some guys who might be taking a step forward next year. Like Jalen McMillan and Jatavian Sanders are the two I mentioned here. Jalen McMillan, the last month or so of the season, I know it was him and like Mike Evans out there, but he was fantastic. And Chris Godwin happens to be a free agent. He might get brought back. I don't know. But Jalen McMillan, if he happens to be the wide receiver 2 and they don't draft someone else and he rolls in as the wide receiver 2, I'm ecstatic with Jalen McMillan. I think he's proved enough that he can be that guy and he can be useful to you in your your starting lineup. I'm gonna kind of see where he's trading at right now, but I know you love him coming out.
I loved him, right? I didn't love his landing spot just because we already know that Mike Evans and Chris Godwin were there, but I did know they didn't have anybody outside of those two guys, right? And so we saw there was an injury there, and he stepped up, and to me, he was the third guy at Washington, but I felt like he was better than Polk. I know Polk had a little bit of injuries when he was at Washington, but yeah, I love Jalen McMillan. Yeah, and so for me, if he's that wide receiver 2 and they move on for Chris Godwin, wheels up to get that. I would try to go out and get as much as I could of him, in startups, right? I think I already have a lot of them that I got in third.
You probably already have them all.
Yeah, right. I have a lot of them and not as much as I thought. I have only 9 shares, but I got a lot of them in the third round, and there was a lot of people. I think you and Ron both told me he's whatever, right? So, but for me, he landed on a good spot. Baker's playing really, really well. I think he's learning from Mike Evans, which is really, really good for him. And so I think he's in a really good spot. So if they don't get a wide receiver, he's a guy to look for and go out either and acquire him, because some people might be just like, I don't know about him, whatever. Or in startups, that's a guy that later on in drafts that you can get and feel really good about him as your wide receiver 3.
Yeah, so I was just kind of pulling it up. It looks like he's going for a 25-second right now. I don't have the exact picks. I'm assuming it's probably mid to late.
Yeah,
which I feel like he's worth a risk at that point.
Totally.
Right?
Yep. We'll get into. We'll do a couple total whole shows on it, but yeah, give me that all day.
Yeah, and Jatavian Sanders, I think Bryce Young took a step forward to kind of end the season. He played a lot better than I saw, especially at the beginning of the season compared to the last few games. I think he looked a lot better. I think he's done enough to kind of keep his job. Jatavian Sanders, I know he got banged up, and he kind of had some moments. I think year 2 is going to be big for him, and I think he can really take another step forward too. And he's another guy I know you liked last offseason. But
totally. And so for me, my worries with him is he's a terrible blocker. So I'm hoping he's gotten better, because I always say it is if you're a good blocker as a tight end, you're going to stay on the field. And tight ends need to stay on the field so they can get the ball, right? Mm-hmm. That's the only way they're going to get the balls if they're on the field. So, but for me, he kind of blew out any expectations that I had for him this year, because I was kind of up in the air, and that's a mid landing spot. And then Bryce Young wasn't playing and whatever, right? But I think he had a really, really good year, and he's got some, forward momentum into 2025. And we know how bad the tight end landscape is, right? And there's only 2 coming in that I feel good about.
Exactly.
I know Fannin is whatever, but I think moving forward, he's a solid tight end to go out and get.
Definitely. All right, let's hit some rookies that underperformed. The ones I kind of put down here, Caleb Williams. I know he had his moments, but he really didn't live up to the because I think in most places he went 101. Marvin
Yep.
Harrison Jr. A lot of times he was 102, if not 103. Roma Dunze, that was partially tied to Caleb Williams, so I don't know how much of that is chicken and egg thing. And then Ricky Pearsall, some of that is a little bit explainable, but also I feel like with the injuries the San Francisco had. I mean, he got outplayed by Juwan Jennings, who isn't like a bad wide receiver, but it's like a first-round wide receiver you kind of expect to be able to outplay Juwan Jennings.
Yeah.
So
one guy I was surprised they didn't see on here, and Greg just kind of hit on it, is Worthy. There's like up and down with him. I kind of know why you probably didn't put him on there, and it's just because rookies in the Chiefs, like their offense it doesn't really happen. I think Rashee Rice was the outlier there. But I would have liked to see more because Rashee Rice wasn't there. Greg said it right there. He had a strong finish, but I would have liked to see more because I think Rashee Rice comes back next year, and I think he is their number one. So I think overall where Worthy was going, he's not. That's why I would say that he's kind of underperformed. The one guy I personally wasn't really that super high on, and I think Roma Dunze is. I think the whole Bears offense, obviously they need a new head coach, they need a new offensive coordinator. So I think there still could be something there with Roma Dunze. But for me, from where he was going, you're not happy about it. And then we talked a little bit about it earlier with Marvin Harrison Jr. But think there's places that he needs to get better for sure, and I would have liked to seen that over the course of the year. But also, I think a lot of it's Kyler. Kyler Murray needs to get better. And so if he doesn't get better, we're not gonna reap the benefit of what Marvin Harrison Jr. could be. And then Caleb Williams, maybe the Bears are just cursed. Same thing with Roma Dunze. And so Ricky Pearsall had a really great game on Monday night. Lions. Yeah, but everybody was scoring that game. So
dude, that was the Lions. No disrespect to the Lions because obviously they're 14-2, but man, they're starting a bunch of like practice squad dudes on that defense right now. So that doesn't do it for me.
But just like Roma Dunze, I would, or like and same with Marvin Harrison Jr. Like I would like to see more from Ricky Pearsall because of the openings there, because of who else wasn't there, right? So I was a little disappointed, and you probably called out the top 5 guys that I would agree with as well. That like if you go back to the first round of rookies, those are the 5 that probably underperformed the most. Worthy, we kind of knew like when we got him, it's like, oh, he's probably going to be the definition of boom or bust. But unfortunately, that's kind of what the Chiefs are turning into, right? Is even Kelsey, right? Is boom or bust. And we've talked about it before. Patrick Mahomes is not the same guy in fantasy terms. They just want to win the game, right? They don't care about stats. They don't care about anything. Exactly. They just want to win the game. They don't care about scoring 40, 50 points. If they can win the game, that's all they care about.
Yeah, well, and that's not good for fantasy. Their defense is fantastic. Exactly. But with Worthy, I have him right now at wide receiver 37, kind of tiered with guys like Jordan Addison, Jameson Williams, Calvin Ridley, kind of in that early 2 kind of range where it's like hedging a little bit. Of like, I don't feel super great about them, but like there's clearly upside there, right? And like you can paint a story of like, well, the last month of the season, Worthy was pretty good. Like he was getting, the last 3 games he got 11, 8 targets, right? He got 2 touchdowns in the last 3 games. The yardage wasn't overly impressive, but that's almost like better that it wasn't just like him just taking like bombs to the house. Right at the beginning of the year, he kind of got like that end around, I think, in the first game of the season where he scored on. Rashee Rice wasn't there. Rashee Rice also, like, he had a good rookie year, but a lot of that too was at the end of the season. So the Chiefs kind of come along slowly. I think with Worthy, it's really going to come down to, like, does Kelsey come back next year? Like, let's say the Chiefs win the Super Bowl and Kelsey retires. Well, then I think all of a sudden Worthy and Rashee Rice both have a better place in the offense. If Kelsey comes back, then I think Worthy kind of becomes more of a third fiddle. Plus, they're probably going to run the ball quite a bit just because they don't have to throw it a ton because their defense is so good. So that's where there's clear concerns. I definitely see the upside though.
Yeah,
it's just I kind of hedged a little bit with where I put him right now.
There's a ton of upside with Worthy, and I just feel like that's a really like good spot for him right there. Is 36, wide receiver 3. You don't feel great about him, but
like you can clearly talk yourself into a path of he becomes great, or well, he kind of goes the way of like, well, now he's gone, right? And so you can kind of talk yourself in either way.
Yep.
And then with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze, I think the thing there is like, I think the talent is there. It's just who are they going to bring in as their coach, right? Like, they're going to bring in a defensive guy, and then who's the offensive coordinator? That's what I think it's really going to boil down to. And then can the Bears get some competent offensive line play?
That's exactly what I was going to say. Is that's the biggest thing, and then if Keenan Allen leaves, then I think Rome Odunze steps up big and moves into that 1A 1B. He can be a wide receiver 1, but I just would have liked to see it more. But I understand why it happened, and so I'm not. By no means am I out on Rome Odunze. I just caution a little bit, right? I need to see it more, and I need to see what's happening with the Bears.
I think his draft profile got a little crazy. I think there was a couple, NFL draft pundits who kind of talked him up a little bit more, and people got really excited. I didn't see it personally. I thought he was a good prospect, but I think he got a little overhyped.
To me, it's kind of like a little bit like Michael Penix, right? That whole Washington offense was super, super good. They were all like solid players.
Pass-friendly offense.
Yeah, right. And so I'm not saying that Rome Odunze is not, this, what he is, but I just caution a little bit, right? I think he could go by the way of being a wide receiver 1, or he could all the way drop down to being a wide receiver 3 and kind of like a middling wide receiver.
And Rome's talented, but he's also he fits into that mold of like when he does a lot of things like really well, but nothing like spectacular. And sometimes guys like that just don't find their way unless they have like a really good scheme that knows how to use them.
Yep.
Exactly. All right, let's hit on some vets that are kind of aging out and where are we going? I think the offseason is a good time to buy some of these vets because they're not scoring points, and people kind of you pull up their profile on Sleeper and you see the big like, oh, he's 29, or like, oh, he's 30, or he's 28, like, oh man, he's getting off my roster, he's way too old. So some guys like Tyreek Hill, Davante Adams, we touched on a little bit. Alvin Kamara still under contract for the Saints. I know he's coming off an injury though. He was still super productive. And then Derrick Henry, that dude just doesn't age apparently, but like at some point he has to, right? And it's like, what are we doing with these guys, right? Are we just fading them in the offseason? We're going to try to acquire them, or what do you think?
For me, the only guy out of that group that I was like, I want nothing to do with him is Davante Adams, right? Because for me, he's like not the same unless he's with Aaron Rodgers. So for me, like Tyreek Hill, he's had some injuries this year. It's been up and down. Obviously, Tua was out. He had a solid game with Huntley, so that was good to see. So I think Tyreek Hill out of that group is probably the best one there, or maybe Derrick Henry. But if you're talking about Henry, Kamara, and Tyreek Hill, those are all 3 serviceable, like solid guys with a lot of upside. Right. And I don't know, if they're of those 3 guys specifically are really hitting that age cliff. I do think they're going to dip in value because most times when you're in startups, you're like, I want the new hot name. I want young, I need to have a young team for it to be good. But to me, the championships are won by guys that like Tyreek Hill, Alvin Kamara, and Derrick Henry. Not so much Alvin Kamara because he was injured, but more the Derrick Henrys and the Tyreek Hills, because Tyreek Hill had a great game in the championship week 17, right? And so I know a lot of times, or most of this year, if you had Tyreek Hill, you may not have made it to the championship. But I think, a guy like Derrick Henry was going in like the 10th, 11th, 12th round of a startup last year, and that is just a smash.
Oh, for sure. And I mean, Alvin Kamara, like he's still the running back 8 on the year, and he missed the last 2 weeks of the season. Like he was fantastic. I think he was running back 2 entering the fantasy playoffs. So like, and now I just kind of pull up. He's running back 20 right now on fantasy calc, which
beautiful.
Let's see. He's that equates to about the running or overall it's like 90 player like 90. So I mean, hell, that's like in the 7th round. If you get like a high end running back 2 in that range, like in a startup, like and say you pair him with like a Kyron Williams early in the
Yeah.
draft, or like a Jahmyr Gibbs, like you're good to go.
Yeah. So the more I think about it, I was just looking at my rankings a bit. Is I think Tyreek Hill is going to take that dip a bit, and I
Hmm.
like Kev just
Hill's
said
the
from the
one that
Debbie
scares me.
Royale. Yeah, right, exactly. And I would say, Hill and Adams, those wide receivers both scare me a bit. And I think Tyreek Hill can still get it done some games. But to me, it's just so mentally like up and down. And we
Two.
it just does he want to play for the Dolphins? Does he not want to play for the Dolphins? Is he going to retire or whatever? Right. And so for me, I feel solid with Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara, not so much with Hill and Adams.
Hill, I think it's less about if he still is talented and more just that Dolphins offense in general. I just don't
Yeah,
want anything to do with it.
exactly.
I think Tua just doesn't. There's no ceiling on that offense. Like if he's playing like at his like peak, there's moments where Hill and Waddle can have their games, but I don't want anything to do with them, especially not
Yeah.
for their prices. And Waddle, I can talk myself into a little bit just because he is still younger, and I think he was banged up a lot this year too. So I can make the excuses for him, but also that's dangerous because we've done the same thing
Yeah.
with Kyle Pitts for like 4 years now. So
I'm with Kev
yeah,
on Waddle being dead. Is like I don't really
sure.
want much to do with Waddle. If I'm in a startup, I'm gonna pass on Waddle. There's other wide receivers that I could take or like wait, because I still think he's up in the teens, right? Probably 14 to 18 range of wide receivers Waddle is. And so for me, there's other
Yeah.
guys around there that I probably could feel more comfortable with. And I think a little bit is with the Dolphins. I know in the beginning we liked Mike McDaniel, but for me, I just think he's more of an
He's
offensive
not.
coordinator than a head
Uh-huh.
coach. And I think we're seeing that dysfunction a little bit at Miami.
I think so too. I don't think he makes in-game adjustments very
Yeah.
well either. I think he has like his scheme that he implements, and then he doesn't like move that around. Right? It's
Yep.
just like this is what I'm running, and it's either going to work or it's not.
Yep.
Um,
100%.
and when it's on, it's great. But then there's a lot of times it kind of feels like maybe the NFL is figuring that out. So let's talk about a little bit about some of these guys that might be bouncing back from injury. I think Rashee Rice. I know he took a IU plummet. Ayuk, Michael Pittman. It sounded like he should have been on IR like most of the year, but he's kind of
Yeah.
fought through it. And then Christian McCaffrey, and we talked about Jalen Waddle a little bit, but out of those guys, who sticks out? I think Rashee Rice is the one that I'm most excited for. I think I have
Yeah.
the most confidence in him returning at a high level. But what about like Michael Pittman and like Brandon Ayuk?
So I'm most excited about Rice and Ayuk. I think
Okay.
Debo, they might move on from him. I was talking a little bit of smack about Ayuk, saying that he sucks and
Mhm.
whatever, but I think you guys talked about it before. It's like he didn't practice at all going into the season. He started
Yeah.
really slow and then he got injured, right? So for me, Pittman though, I just worry because we know who Anthony Richardson is. I know
Hmm.
like Josh Downs had some solid games. Alec Pierce had some solid games. So I personally think Michael Pittman is a good wide receiver, but I just don't think he's in a good situation. So for me, out of this group, it's Rice and Ayuk, and then I'm hoping CMC can come back to what he is, but he's going to be another year older. And so I just think it'll be interesting to see what the Niners do with all their guys.
Christian McCaffrey is the one that for me it's like I don't know what to do with him, right? So
Yeah.
I was looking at fancy calc. He's running back 14. He's only 28. Uh, and it's like, all right, what are we gonna do here? Like, there's a I don't want to fade him at that price and have him bust out for another running back one season, but I also am scared to take him in a
Totally.
startup and be stuck with a guy who's just never the same because of the injury that he had, right? So
Yeah. Oh wow. Addison over Waddle, Olave, or Ayuk. I think Waddle, Olave, and Ayuk all have more upside than Addison because Addison plays a little bit of second fiddle. But to me, they're all kind of clumped together. I know earlier you said you had Addison down at like 36. Right now, I can't tell you exactly where I have him, but I can look a little bit.
I
But
can
I
tell
feel a
you
little
right
more.
now,
Yeah, go ahead.
I have all three of those guys over Addison right now.
Yeah, that's kind
I
of where
don't.
I'm at as well.
here's the thing with Addison. I like Addison, but he's a really good like supporting wide receiver, like a wide receiver 2 for his team. There's going to be games where he disappears because Justin Jefferson just takes over, and like he's never going to get away from that. There's going to be games where he has great games, and he's been fine, right? He's been good. So I think you can just talk yourself into the upside of the other guys more.
A guy like Addison is a guy that I want to have I want to have him as like my 4th wide receiver, right? Because I want to be able to be like, okay,
oh yeah, he's great in the flex. Yeah.
Let me look at the matchup. Okay, they're going to take Justin Jefferson away. They have a really good corner. All right, cool. I'm going to feel good about Addison playing. But if I have him in my 3rd wide receiver and I feel like I need to play him every week, there's going to be weeks that you're going to get burned, right? And so someone like a Waddle, Olave, and Ayuk, I know I personally am not really big on Waddle, but Olave and Ayuk, if Olave can figure out his injuries, I know he's got a ton of concussions and things like that, but Olave and Ayuk are guys to me that are both could be that wide receiver 1 guy. Over Addison, he's just more of like a secondary guy, wide receiver 2. So that's why I have those 3 guys all over Addison.
I love Jordan Addison, but like looking at his box score here too, like he had 2 games over 100 yards, but really he didn't have any other games over 75 yards, right? Like all of his yardage totals were in the 40s to 60s for the most part. He got bailed out. He had 9 touchdowns on the year, which is kind of similar to his rookie year where he had 10 touchdowns, but the yardage wasn't always that awesome. I don't know. I mean, maybe he just has a nose for the end zone. He has like kind of that Adam Thielen in him, right? Where he's going to score a bunch of touchdowns, but not necessarily get a bunch of yardage. And fine, that's who he is. But I think that limits the amount of upside he's going to have. Whereas like Olave, if he can stay healthy, or Brandon Ayuk, I think Ayuk has shown it more so.
Totally.
Waddle is one. Yeah. Waddle's probably the closest one to Addison, I would say, where it's like I could talk myself into either side there. But Olave and Ayuk, I still have pretty confidently higher than
that's where I'm at exactly. And Ayuk's been all the way up to like wide receiver 11, 12, right? And so when he plays really well, he's under contract, so that he's going to be back. If they move on from Debo, I think I think Ayuk right there, way over Addison. I think Olave is a little bit closer, but I still have him over Addison, and then Waddle and Addison, especially because I'm kind of down on Waddle. It's like they're kind of the same to me.
All right. Well, I think we covered a lot here. The offseason is just barely getting started, so stick with us over the offseason. I think we're going to have a lot of good content. I know we're going to go over some NFL free agency previews that we're going to go over. We're getting some draft prospects here and kind of break down as we get closer to draft season. So I'm just excited. I love the offseason, and this is where you can make some moves that most help your team. So stick with us over the offseason, and thanks for tuning in, guys. I really appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thanks. Happy New Year, everybody.
Peace out, everyone.